This video is going to show you how to make an Easter cake, although exactly the same method could be used if you wanted to make a birthday cake or a cake for some other celebration, or just actually make a cake at any time of the year. So the first thing you need to do is get your oven on. I've got my oven on gas mark 6, which is 200 degrees Celsius. You need to grease and line your baking tins. Now what I've done here is I've greased the actual tin, put a piece of greaseproof paper in, and then greased over that, as well as greasing the sides, and that's obviously just to make sure that our cake doesn't stick to the tins when we cook it. In my mixing bowl then, I've got my sugar, my margarine and my flour. I'm about to add my eggs to this and then just mix it all together. Now because I'm using 4 eggs, I've got a 200-gram mixture here. I've cracked them into a bowl ready. Okay, some of you may notice that the one yolk is yellower and the others are more orange. That's just because they're different varieties of, well, the same eggs but just from different shops. Okay, so put them in there first of all just to check that there's no shells, any bits I want to take out. So I'm going to add that to my mixing bowl, and then just very carefully I'm going to mix all of those ingredients together until they come to a paste. Now I'm not going to get you to watch me do this because there's not a lot that can go wrong. So you just need to get all of the ingredients mixed in, and then I will show you what it should look like. Okay, so with a little bit of time, and as I said, some good mixing, your mixture should then look like a batter. Now the next thing you need to do, if you're doing, as I am doing here, a 2-layered cake, obviously if you're doing more layers, then you divide it out a bit more. You need to divide your mixture between your 2 cake tins. Now it can be very tempting to think, right, I'll do the one and then I'll move on to the other. The only problem with doing that is you may end up with one of the cakes much thicker than the other. So it's a lot easier to put a spoonful into each of your tins. Now you can see here, I'm not putting it all in a dollop in the middle. I'm trying to space it around the tins a bit, and again that just makes it easier to spread out when we've gone through all of the mixture. Okay, so there's no rush. Just make sure, as I said, that you get all of your mixture out of the bowl and into your tins. And as I said, just trying to get that done as equally as possible so we don't end up with one very thin sponge and one very thick sponge. Now, if you've got a spatula, you can spread those out with a spatula. If you haven't, you can just do exactly like I'm doing here and just use a wooden spoon to do that. So all you need to do is just make sure that your mixture is right through, spread right through to the edges. Okay, so the next stage now obviously is going to be to pop those into the oven, where they're going to take, well, anywhere between 12 and 15 minutes to cook through. And again, I will come back to you then once we've actually got to that stage. So while your cakes are cooking, you can first of all do your dishes, which I've done. I'm using the same bowl here. And you can start making up your butter icing. Now, if you put your butter or your margarine, weigh that into the bowl first of all and get that nice and soft. Now, it can be tempting just to put all the icing sugar on top and try and mix it in that way. If you are doing it by hand like this though, it does become very difficult and it becomes very dry and a lot less easy to manage. So if you soften up your butter or your margarine first of all, weigh your icing sugar into a separate bowl and then just add a couple of tablespoons at a time and then mix that through before you add the next lot, and you just keep going along with that until you've added all of your icing sugar. So as I said, nothing wrong if you put it all in at once. It's not going to matter. It's just going to be a lot harder to mix up. It's a lot easier to keep on top of it and make sure that it stays. This is the sort of consistency that we're going to want once all of the icing sugar is mixed in. So it's easier just to add it, as I said, a little bit at a time, and then just mix it in. You may think that that's going to take a lot longer, but it won't. When, as I said, believe me, if you try adding it all in one go, it is a lot more difficult to get that to the paste sort of consistency. Okay, so you just keep doing that until you've added all of your icing sugar and mixed it all in. Okay, so as I said, it takes a little while, but you will actually get it to this stage. So it just should be a nice consistency that you're going to be able to pipe with if you wanted to pipe with it. If you're using butter, sometimes it can stay a little bit firmer, a thicker consistency, and not actually get quite like this. So it may be that you need to add a teaspoon or a tablespoon of milk or water. But again, don't add too much. If you are going to add any, just add 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon to start with, and then see how it goes. Don't tip loads in at one time, otherwise it's going to be far too watery. Now I am going to colour this for the cake that I'm going to do, and I would like 2 different colours. So I'm going to put some of it into a smaller bowl, where I'm going to turn that an orangey colour, and this I just want to have as a yellow colour. So I'm just going to add my food colouring in and then mix that around. Now again, you don't have to do this, and again, depending on what sort of cake you're making, you may want to choose different colours if you are going to. Don't forget, which I know I've said in some of my other videos, you can very often get different shades just by using different amounts of food colouring. So if you've only got 1 food colouring and you want some different colours, you can just add different amounts to make it a lighter and darker shade. So that's fine for me, for the colour that I want. Okay, it hasn't actually put too much colour in there, but it's just put a yellow tint to it. The other one then I want is some orange. So again, just going to add some orange in there, just a little bit to start with, because if I decide I want it darker, I can always add a little bit more, but once you've added it, you can't take that out. So again, I just want a little bit of a subtle colour. I'm not looking for really bright colours, so that is fine for me, for the colour that I want. So I'm just going to set those to one side now while I wait for my cake to finish cooking. Okay, so when your cakes are cooked, so they should be nice and springy on the top. Unless you've got a really thick cake tin, there shouldn't be any need to stick spoons or skewers or knives into that. It should just be as long as it actually is nice and firm. If you're finding that your cake has stuck to the outside, which even though you've greased it may sometimes happen, just actually use, now mine hasn't, I'll show you anyway, just actually use a table knife or a palette knife and just actually loosen it from around the edges. What you can do then is just very carefully tip your cake upside down onto your cooling rack. Just need to get that in the wrong place. And then you need very carefully, because it will still be warm, to remove the greaseproof paper. Now if you're doing this because we're going to make it in school, we'll actually keep hold of the greaseproof paper, because what we're going to do, there's not enough time to do this all in one lesson in school. So we're going to freeze our cakes until our next lesson. So we're going to keep the piece of greaseproof paper, and we're going to put both of the cakes then one on top of the other with the greaseproof in between, and wrap it up in some cling film to go into the freezer. Now for the purposes of this video at the moment, this is being done in case you want to make one at home, so that greaseproof paper can just go into the bin. Now I'm going to do something to show you what not to do. It can be very tempting once your cakes come out of the oven to think, right, I can start decorating it now straight away. These cakes are still very, very hot. And if you were to put some butter icing on there now, if you're going to put butter icing in the middle of your cake, okay, so hopefully you can see that. And I'm not going to put any more than that on because this is to show you what not to do. Okay, as I'm sure you can see, that is actually starting to melt into the cake. So the cake is far too hot for you to do that at the moment. So you really need to wait for those to cool down. Now what you can do in the meantime, I'm going to decorate the sides of my cake. So I've started grating up my chocolate ready for that. So you can just get everything ready to finish off the decoration of your cake. Okay, so once your cake has cooled down enough, you need to spread your butter icing on one side of your cake. Now, depending on what you want inside your cake, if you wanted to, you could put some jam, or you could put some chocolate spread on the other side, and then we're just going to sandwich them together. Now, I'm not putting anything other than butter icing, so I've put my cake there now. So I've got, as I said, my sandwich cake with just the buttercream in between. Now what I want to show you what to do is if you wanted to decorate the sides of your cake. So this is quite a large cake, and again larger than the ones that we use in school. So what you need to do is being very, very careful, hold your cake up in your hand and then spread your butter icing over the sides of your cake. Now, depending on how much cooking you do at home, you might have a turntable to help you do this a bit easier. I tend to just do everything using my hands. So just going to spread the butter icing all around the cake, and then when we've done that right the way around, we are going to dip it into what we want on the sides of our cake. Now I want chocolate on the sides of my cake, so I've just got my butter icing on my cake there, and then I'm just going to dip it into, and I'm put that back in the camera, dip it into the chocolate. So we need to do that all the way around. Once you've got all the way around on your cake, I would suggest then that you place your cake onto whatever you are serving your cake on, whether that be a cake board or whether that be a plate, so that once you've decorated the top, you don't have to try and move it again. Okay, so I put the cake on the plate now. I've decorated, as I said, around the sides. Now I've done that with grated chocolate. The pieces were quite big, so it hasn't been as successful as it would have been had I got those a bit smaller. You could decorate your sides, so of your own cake, in desiccated coconut. You could use some chopped nuts. You could crush up some Oreo biscuits, and the smaller the ingredient is, the better coverage you actually get on it. As I said, those chocolate pieces are quite big, so it hasn't covered as well as it might have done. But as I said, you know, you've got lots of things that you could use to go on there. So now we're going to move on to the top of the cake. So I'm just going to spread a layer of butter icing over the top because I want to pipe onto the top of my cake, but I just want there to be something for that piping and anything else that I'm going to put onto the cake to stick to. So I'm just putting a thin layer of butter icing over the cake. I've actually put some of the butter icing ready into piping bags as well. So as I said, I just want this as a layer over the cake just for anything that I'm going to put into the centre of the cake to stick to. The butter icing that I've got in the piping bag will obviously just stick to the cake anyway, but I just want to try and make sure that it's got a fairly nice smooth middle for the decoration for my cake. Okay, so, and as I said, all of this being done now on the plate so that I don't have to move it again. So we've done the top and we've done the side, so now we can actually move on to the decorating. Right, so to finish off here now, I have done myself 2 piping bags, one with the yellow butter icing and one with the orangey peachy colour butter icing that I did, and I'm just going to decorate the top. Now if you haven't used a piping bag before, and you don't have to, again, if you don't have a piping bag and nozzles at home but you've got a sandwich bag, you can use a sandwich bag just as easily and just cut the bottom of the sandwich bag off in one of the corners, and you can just use that. It doesn't have to have a nozzle on there. But what you need to do, put your butter icing in and then really twist around the top of it just to make sure that it doesn't, when you squeeze with your hand, you don't want it coming out of the top. You want to push it down towards the nozzle. So And again, if you haven't done piping before, you may want to just have a go on your work surface first just to see how it goes. So I want to alternate the colours. So I'm just going to pipe around my cake, leaving a gap in between that I'm going to fill up with the orangey colour butter icing. And I'm going to put some mini eggs onto there as well. Okay, so that's my one lot butter icing, and then exactly the same, making sure that you've got it nice and tight, and then just pipe in between. Didn't do that one too good, spread it out a bit. Do you know, I do so much better with my cakes when I'm not videoing myself. I seem to be a bit of a shambles when I'm videoing myself. So, but you get the general idea. Okay, so I've just alternated the colours there. What I'm going to do then as well, and I don't think I'll do it on every single one. Okay, that might look a bit too much. So I'm just going to put some mini eggs. Now, I'm probably not going to have enough to do all white. So I'll swap that one over and I'll alternate with yellow as well. Okay, so again, it's a good idea to just count up what you've got before you start popping them on. I'm probably going to end up with some of the same colour here, but that doesn't matter. Okay, as I said, on the whole, I've got yellow and white ones on there. I've just done with one more yellow one, so never mind. We'll put another white one on there. Now what I've decided to do in the centre of my cake is try and make what looks a bit like a nest. So I've got some of the grated chocolate here. So I'm just going to pick that up and put that. I just had to go on the plate first to see if I could get the sort of shape I wanted. You might want to do yourself some Rice Krispies and mould that into a nest. You may want to put some Easter chicks on there. Okay, you may decide that you just want to do some extra piping on there. And then I'm just going to place some of the eggs in there. Now, I've obviously got some butter icing left as well, so I could do another layer of piping around the outside. So this time around, I'll just do some of the yellow where I've got some of the orange. But again, you can just keep playing around with it really until you're happy with what you've managed to do. So as I said, you could do this as an Easter cake. It is coming up to Easter time. You could do it as a celebration cake. You could do it as a birthday cake if you've got somebody's birthday coming up. Or it could just be that you want to have a go at doing a decorated cake, which, as I said, is what we would be doing in school during the summer term. So just have a play around. If you do have a go at making a cake over Easter, whether it be an Easter cake or any other kind of cake, I would love to see what you manage to do. So please send in some photos if you're able to. Okay, and I'll just hold that up a little bit closer so you can see. Okay, but again, shows or uses quite a lot of different skills there, because it's not easy to decorate the sides of the cake. And again, if you don't fancy doing that, you don't have to. Okay, it's just giving you the options to show you some of the things that you could do. So as I said, I look forward to seeing what you are able to make.